Hey y'all, Brad of Full Spectrum Survival did a really good video on would you let a Muslim into your bug out group, and this got me thinking. It's an important topic. Who would you let in your bug out group? That's assuming your bug out group's attractive to other people to come and live in. That's not necessarily a given. So I got to thinking about this. Who would Kitty let into her bug out group, and specifically would Kitty let an American into her bug out group? So for those of you who are American and are a bit geographically challenged, I'm going to put up a few slides so you can get a good idea of where approximately Canada is. Canada actually is a neighbour of the United States of America, along with Mexico and Russia. We have a lot of commonalities and we have a lot of differences, but we have more commonalities than differences. So the answer to would Kitty let an American into a bug out group should be an obvious one, right? The answer should be yes. But there are some issues. Americans generally see the world in a different lens from how Canadians generally see the world. And as with all stereotypes, that's not necessarily true on the individual level. There are a few Americans that I've met online that I might let into my bug out group. But my question is, would Kitty let them in? Now, just by looking at videos online and just by looking at pictures online with some Google searching, providing I'm not being programmed by Google, there is an obvious difference right off the bat between who would be in an American prepper group and who would be in a Canadian prepper group. Canadians tend to prep to protect themselves and their families from natural and unnatural disasters. They tend to do much of the same things that American preppers are doing. I think the fundamental difference for me, and which would be a problem for Kitty, is that a lot of Americans are actually prepping to protect what they would describe as freedom. Now, what exactly freedom is an interesting topic, which I'm not going to get into in this video. But most Canadians don't prep to mass kill their neighbours who are starving to death. Canada's got a long history of fighting brutal wars and winning them. America's got a long history of fighting brutal wars and losing them. That's again is a difference in psychology. America tends to see things in terms of black and white and right and wrong, and Canada tends to see things in where, yes, we may have invaded Korea, yes, we may be doing this, yes, we might be going to Mali, but our choices and our chances of success in the long term rely on us actually treating people where we can in a decent and humane manner. There's also a little bit of fear of Americans in most Canadians. It's not that well stated, but it's true. America has invaded us a few times, unsuccessfully, and America makes no bones about the fact that it has the largest military in the world and will take oil and water reserves if it needs it. So that makes us a little nervous up here. We don't want the American eagle to jump on our Canadian goose and kill us. Now, one of the things I would point out is that a lot of Americans actually don't have a very good idea of what the Canadian character is like. And yes, you can invade us anytime you like, and yes, you can conquer us anytime you like, Americans. But I think you'll find a lot of Canadians will never, ever surrender. So leaving that aside, Americans tend to have big, aggressive trucks. They tend to have lots of ammunition and lots of guns, though typically you can only really fire 2 guns at a time. Canadians tend to have rifles and hand pistols and shotguns and knives, and their principal use for most Canadian preppers is to protect themselves from the odd crazy person, because, you know, some people might get up here from America, and also to protect us from things like bears and packs of wild English bull terriers. This lack of paranoia, mental illness paranoia in most of the Canadian prepping group also means that we don't tend to typically pack our bug out bags half full with guns and ammunition, because it's kind of a pointless waste of time being able to slaughter hundreds of people but when they're actually shooting back at you, because they're all prepping the same way as you did and you're just going to die anyway. Canadians tend to more prep for things like lack of water or lack of clean water or problems getting food or to be able to build a cabin in the woods. whereas most of the Americans tend to have built fortifications, and even the philosophy of travel is armoured, aggressive, brutal, gasoline use, whereas most Canadian preppers, they will, if they are bugging out, and you can look at this online, most of them are planning to walk or bike or use kayaks or canoes. The difference in philosophy there is quite astounding. Most Canadian preppers want to tread gently through the post-apocalyptic world, not carve out a swath of blood behind them, because blood goes both ways. The other thing Kitty might be worried about is intellectual level for the average American who might show up to join her group. Most Americans are actually have a grade reading literacy level of 8 or less, and most Canadians have one that's a little bit higher. Americans don't tend to travel much. They tend to be very insulated into where they live. They don't tend to watch anything other than American TV. They don't tend to watch foreign films. Now, Kitty really likes foreign films. If it's black and white with Hungarian subtitles and everybody dies horribly in it, she really likes those types of films. So watching films that most Americans might enjoy would really upset Kitty. You might also be concerned about the fact that America tends to like murdering each other. It tends to be a quite an obvious thing. The average American likes to kill people. Most Americans know people who've been murdered. Most Canadians don't. Another concern would be the lack of communal spirit. Whereas I said before, Canadians like to prep for their group and their local community, whereas most American preppers are prepping for themselves. A lot more lone wolf types down south. And if you look at statistics, Canadians tend to look after single women with kids and keep them out of poverty, whereas Americans tend to put them on buses and send them for miles and miles to clean shopping malls, because that's apparently the American way. Not thinking about the children needing a mother, but thinking about the fact that the children have to be born even if the mother doesn't want to have the child, but not doing very much for the child after it's born. Whereas in Canada, fundamentally, most Canadians believe that people have the right to freedom of religion. Most people have the right of freedom of procreation and gender identity and everything else. So that might be a concern for Kitty. Kitty might be concerned that an American prepper might show up and think everything is guns, bullets and Bibles, and start to treat the women like the Old Testament. And Kitty would not like that. Kitty has sharp claws. And Kitty would be very annoyed if some American showed up and thought that she would do all the laundry and she would do all the cooking while he patrolled the perimeter. That would really upset Kitty, and that might be a fundamental reason why she might not allow an American into her bug-out group. Now, of course, Kitty might be getting this wrong. She might be playing off stereotypes, right? I mean, people have stereotypes. Stereotypical attitudes are a block to communication, and in SHTF you don't want to block out anybody from your bug out group who can help you. In Brad's great video, in the comments, somebody pointed out, not to a large number of thumbs up, that in quite a few of the states of America, if you actually exclude Muslims, you're excluding probably most of the doctors, most of the nurses in the area. And that's definitely true in Toronto, Canada. Though I don't think anybody in Canada that has a bug out group would actually exclude a Muslim just because they're Muslim. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't think we consider Muslims to be a threat to our national identity. So that again is a difference. Now the other problem is that Canada likes to see itself as a calmer, younger, more world-wise version of the United States. And when America turns around and imposes trade sanctions upon us because we're apparently beating up on you economically, whereas in fact we're beating up on you economically because we have universal health care and good welfare programs, that kind of concerns us. And then you have to look at the average American. The average American is far more likely to have served time in a prison than the average Canadian. And that's concerning because prisons are a great place to learn how to cheat, rob and mutilate and be violent. They are very much punitive in the United States of America. So you go into the prison to suffer dreadfully. And that's a good thing if you want to have people discharged from prison who are antisocial and violent. Whereas in Canada, we tend to want to see our criminals removed from society, but with still some vague hope of rehabilitation. So yeah, Kitty might be concerned that you as an American have had a violent criminal background and have actually been in jail. That would concern her. Now, Kitty's a female, and she would be very, very concerned that Americans might be more likely to prevent her from taking birth control and sleeping with whoever she likes, as long as they're an adult. That would be a fundamental issue that Kitty would have some problems with. Kitty would not be very happy to be told that she had to marry me and had to stay with me for the rest of her life. Now, that's one of her goals, but that's her goal. And if she changes her mind, she has every right to do that. And as a Canadian, I agree with her. But a lot of Americans seem to feel that marriage is young for women, and marriage is for life, and marriage is only to produce children. That would really concern Kitty. She wouldn't like to see the women in her prepper group be turned into baby-producing machines for a bunch of lazy-ass guys who just sit around oiling guns and shooting people if they see them come near the perimeter. She wouldn't like that. She really wouldn't. I'm going to get into language differences because that divides people unnaturally. And most Americans, I believe, given sufficient time and help, could learn to speak and read and write in proper English. I don't have any doubts about that. Most of you guys can spell colour with a U and behaviour with a U. Spell it the way it's supposed to be spelled, not the lazy way, the illiterate way. Now, one of the fundamental problems Kitty would have is actually talking to Americans in terms of distance and weights and measures. Most Americans have absolutely no idea what a litre is and what a metre is. Now, that's a sad thing because that divides you from the entirety of the rest of the world, apart from maybe a couple of weird islands somewhere. So if you want to be in Kitty's prepper group and you're an American, you've got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. Now, the next video to this one will show you how you might be able to become the elite group of Americans who Canadians would allow into their prepper group. Well, that's about all for me, eh? Au revoir.
Let's go. Ready? From the top. My favorite shows on TV have 12 minutes of advertising. I can't get behind that kind of time.
Eat quickly, drive faster, make more money now? I can't get behind that.
My kids say, he said to me, and I'm like, and he